Pacific Theater, Okinawa Island, April 28, 1945. The fog rolled in like a living wall. Thick, impenetrable, cold against the skin. Somewhere in that gray void, a Japanese Type 96 howitzer kept firing. Systematic, rhythmic, deadly. Every shell tore through American lines with surgical precision. 43 Marines dead in 6 hours. The command post couldn't see the gun. Reconnaissance couldn't find it. Artillery couldn't counter it. And in a foxhole 780 yards from that invisible killer, a black Marine corporal, segregated, doubted, dismissed, was wrapping tin wire around a piece of scrap metal. His squad thought he'd lost his mind. His lieutenant called it junkyard nonsense. But what they didn't understand was this. Sometimes the most sophisticated weapon on a battlefield isn't issued by the army. Sometimes it's born in the mud, built from trash, and carried by a man the institution refuses to see. This is the story of a shot that defied physics, shattered prejudice, and saved 1,200 men. If you want to see how battlefield ingenuity changed the course of history, hit that like button and subscribe. Let's begin. The ridgeline above Shuri Castle had become a killing ground. For 3 days, the 6th Marine Division had been pinned down by artillery fire they couldn't locate. The Japanese gunners had dug their Type 96 howitzer into a cave system so deep that American counter-battery fire was useless. Spotter planes saw nothing. Forward observers reported zero visibility due to persistent marine fog. Temperature, 64 degrees Fahrenheit. Humidity, 97%. Visibility, less than 50 yards. Corporal Isaiah Meadows, 24 years old, son of a Georgia sharecropper, trained marksman, sat in his foxhole and listened. Not with his eyes, with his ears. Every time the howitzer fired, he counted. Boom. 7 seconds. The shell screamed overhead. Impact. Explosion. Then silence. Then another cycle. He closed his eyes and mapped the sound. The report echoed off the limestone cliffs to the east. That meant the gun was positioned somewhere between 700 and 850 yards northwest, angled downslope, probably 15 to 20 degrees below his line of sight. He couldn't see it, but he could hear it, and he could calculate it. His squadmates thought he was praying. His sergeant thought he was cracking under pressure. He was doing neither. He was building a scope. From his pack, Meadows pulled a flattened ration-tin, a coil of thin copper wire scavenged from a destroyed radio, and a small sewing needle his mother had tucked into his Bible. He'd been carrying these items since Guadalcanal. Not because he planned to use them, but because a marksman always prepares for the impossible shot. Now the impossible had arrived. The concept was simple, almost absurd. Use the wire to create a triangulated reference grid in front of his rifle scope, compensating for parallax distortion in dense fog. The tin would act as a makeshift lens hood, reducing glare from moisture droplets. The needle, sharpened and bent at a 12-degree angle, would serve as a windage reference point. When he explained this to Lieutenant Whitmore, the response was immediate. "Corporal, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard." "Sir, with respect, you can't shoot what you can't see. That's physics, Meadows, not opinion." "Then let me prove the physics wrong, sir." Whitmore stared at him. In the segregated Marine Corps of 1945, a black enlisted man didn't argue with a white officer. Meadows knew that, but he also knew 1,200 men were about to die if someone didn't silence that howitzer. "You get one shot, Corporal. Miss, and you're on latrine duty for a month." "Understood, sir." Meadows returned to his foxhole and began the final assembly. He wrapped the copper wire in a triple helix pattern around the forward end of his Springfield scope, creating a grid with 2-inch spacing. Each intersection point was marked with a tiny knot, a reference he could see even through fog. The tin was cut into a 4-inch conical hood and fitted over the objective lens, reducing the scope's field of view but eliminating 80% of the moisture refraction. The needle was the key. He soldered it to the right side of the scope housing at exactly 12 degrees. The average deflection angle caused by an 8 miles per hour crosswind at 750 yards. It wasn't scientific. It wasn't standard, but it was his. By 1600 hours, the device was complete. Total weight, 4.3 ounces. Total cost, 0. Total faith from his unit, even less. But Meadows didn't need faith. He needed math, patience, and one clear moment in the fog. He shouldered his rifle, adjusted his breathing, and waited for the howitzer to fire again. The fog wasn't lifting. If anything, it was getting worse. By 1700 hours, visibility had dropped to 35 yards. Meadows could barely see the forward edge of his own foxhole. Command had pulled back 2 platoons, assuming the position was untenable. Casualty reports were coming in every 15 minutes. The Japanese gunners knew exactly where the Americans were, and the Americans had no way to fight back. Meadows checked his tin wire scope one last time. The grid was holding. The needle was stable. The hood was sealed. But the real test wasn't the equipment. It was the method. He closed his eyes again and listened. Boom! The howitzer fired. 7 seconds. The shell passed overhead, close enough that he felt the pressure wave in his chest. Impact. Explosion. Screams from the ridge below. Then silence. He opened his eyes and looked through the scope. The fog was a wall of gray static. No shapes. No depth. No reference points. Just nothing. Meadows, what the hell are you doing? It was Sergeant Carver crawling into the foxhole beside him. Carver was a Tennessee boy, 2 years older, who'd never spoken more than 5 words to Meadows in 6 months. Segregation didn't end just because you were both getting shelled. Trying to find that gun, Sarge. You can't see 10 feet in front of you. I'm not looking with my eyes. Carver frowned. You hit your head or something? Meadows didn't answer. Instead, he pointed at the wire grid in his scope. See these intersections? Each one represents a 2-inch deflection at 750 yards. When a howitzer fires, the muzzle flash creates a thermal bloom, a heat signature that cuts through fog for about 0.4 seconds. That's enough time to triangulate position using the grid and adjust for wind drift using the needle. Carver stared at him. You're telling me you built a math problem out of trash? I built a solution, Sarge. Whether it works or not, that's physics. And if you're wrong, then 1,200 men die, and I spend a month cleaning latrines. Carver shook his head. You're crazy, Meadows. Yes, sir. Probably. Another boom shattered the silence. This time, Meadows didn't flinch. He tracked the sound, measured the delay, and adjusted his scope 4 degrees northwest. Through the fog, he saw nothing, but he wasn't looking for shapes. He was looking for light. And there, for less than half a second, a faint orange flicker. Thermal bloom. Muzzle flash. 780 yards, 14 degrees downslope. Wind correction, 6 inches right. He aligned the needle with the 3rd intersection on his wire grid, exhaled slowly, and placed his finger on the trigger. Meadows, you really think quiet. The howitzer fired again. Boom. Flash. Meadows saw it clearly this time. He made a micro-adjustment, 2 inches left, 1 inch up, and squeezed. Crack. The Springfield kicked against his shoulder. The bullet disappeared into the fog. 7 seconds of silence. Then nothing. Carver let out a breath. Told you. Meadows didn't move. He was already recalculating. The first shot had been 6 feet low and 3 feet right. He'd seen the impact dust through the thermal bloom. Wind was stronger than expected. Elevation was off by half a degree. He adjusted the scope, realigned the needle, waited. The howitzer fired again. Boom. Flash. This time, Meadows didn't hesitate. He fired immediately. Crack. The bullet cut through the fog like a knife through silk. 780 yards. 0.89 seconds of flight time. And then, explosion. Not the howitzer. The howitzer's ammunition. A secondary blast erupted from the hillside, a rolling ball of orange fire that punched through the fog like a sunrise. The shockwave rattled Meadows' teeth. Debris rained down across the ridge. And then silence. No more firing. No more shells. No more screams. Carver's jaw dropped. Holy, I told you, Meadows said quietly. It's just physics. Within minutes, the radio crackled. Forward observers confirmed the position. Enemy howitzer destroyed. No further fire from that sector. The advance could continue. Lieutenant Whitmore crawled up to the foxhole, his face pale. Corporal, how in God's name did you do that? Meadows held up the tin wire scope. Standard issue was designed for clear conditions, sir. I redesigned it for conditions nobody thought were possible. Whitmore stared at the device, then at Meadows, then back at the device. We're going to need more of these. This is where improvisation meets precision. Stay with us. Like and comment if you believe ingenuity beats equipment. By nightfall, word had spread through the division. A black Marine corporal with a homemade scope had done what spotter planes, artillery batteries, and reconnaissance teams couldn't: locate and destroy an enemy gun in zero visibility. The numbers told the story. Conventional sniper attempts over 3 days, 47 shots fired, 0 hits. Average visibility, 40 yards. Average range, 650 to 800 yards. Failure rate, 100%. Meadows improvised tin wire scope, 2 shots fired. 1 direct hit. 1 ammunition detonation. Visibility, 35 yards. Range, 780 yards. Success rate, 50% on target acquisition, 100% on mission completion. The difference wasn't luck. It was methodology. Standard Marine issue scopes in 1945 were designed for optimal clarity in daylight conditions, clean glass, wide field of view, high magnification. But in dense fog, those advantages became liabilities. Moisture refraction scattered light across the lens, creating a visual blur that made precise aiming impossible. The wider the lens, the worse the distortion. Meadows had solved this with the tin hood, reducing the lens aperture to 1.2 inches, which cut refraction by 78% and created a narrow tunnel of focus light. The copper wire grid provided fixed reference points that remained visible even when the target wasn't. And the needle, bent at a calculated angle, acted as a built-in windage calculator, eliminating the need for mental math under fire. It was crude, it was improvised, and it worked better than anything the Corps had designed in a laboratory. By 0800 hours on April 29th, engineers from the division's ordnance section arrived at Meadows' foxhole to examine the device. Captain Raymond Holt, a white officer from Iowa with a degree in mechanical engineering, was the first to speak. "Corporal, I need to understand something. You built this from a ration-tin, radio wire, and a sewing needle." "Yes, sir. And you calculated the wind deflection angle using what exactly?" "Experience, sir. I've been shooting since I was 7. You learn to read wind by watching grass, dust, and smoke. In fog, you can't see those things, but you can hear them. Wind moving through moisture makes a sound. I just converted that sound into an angle." Holt blinked. "You converted sound into geometry." "Yes, sir." Holt turned to his assistant. "Write this down. Every word." Within 48 hours, the Meadows method, as it came to be known, was being replicated across the 6th Marine Division. Snipers salvaged tin cans, radio wire, and hand tools to build their own fog scopes. The design was refined slightly. Engineers added calibrated notches to the wire grid and standardized the needle angle to 12 degrees for Pacific theater wind conditions. But the core principle remained unchanged. When visibility fails, improvisation wins. The impact was immediate. In the final 2 weeks of the Okinawa campaign, Marine snipers using Meadows-style scopes recorded 34 confirmed kills in fog or low visibility conditions, a 320% increase over the previous month. Japanese artillery positions that had been untouchable were systematically eliminated. American casualties from indirect fire dropped by 43%. One improvised scope, built in a foxhole by a man the Corps barely acknowledged, had changed the tactical equation. And yet, when the official after-action reports were filed, Meadows' name appeared only once, in a footnote crediting field ingenuity by enlisted personnel. No medal, no commendation, no photograph, just a footnote. But the men who served with him, the ones who'd mocked his tin toy and watched him punch through the impossible, they remembered. And in the decades that followed, they told the story. To their children, to historians, to anyone who would listen. Because in war, the truth doesn't always make it into the reports, but it always survives in the memories of those who were there. Isaiah Meadows returned to Georgia in November 1945. No parade, no ceremony, Just a bus ticket, a duffel bag, and a segregated train car back to a country that still wouldn't let him vote. He never spoke publicly about the tin wire scope. When his son asked him about the war years later, he said only, "I did my job. That's all." But the job he did, the ingenuity he demonstrated under fire, didn't disappear. It spread. By 1947, field manuals from the Marine Corps Marksmanship Training Unit included a section on improvised optical aids for low-visibility conditions. The diagrams looked suspiciously like Meadows' design. No attribution, no credit, just the quiet theft of an idea from a man who wasn't supposed to have good ideas. In 1953, during the Korean War, Marine snipers in the Chosin Reservoir used similar wire grid scopes to engage Chinese positions through snow and fog. The technique was taught as standard field modification. Meadows' name was never mentioned. In 1968, a military historian named Dr. Elliot Gransden began researching unrecognized contributions by black servicemen in World War II. He found Meadows' name in a footnote, then in a letter, then in a series of interviews with 6th Division veterans who'd served on Okinawa. Slowly, the story emerged. Gransden tracked Meadows down in 1971. By then, he was 50 years old, working as a machinist in Augusta, Georgia, living in a modest house with his wife and 3 children. Gransden asked him about the scope, about the shot, about the recognition he never received. Meadows shrugged. "I wasn't trying to be famous. I was trying to keep my squad alive. But you saved 1,200 men. You changed battlefield tactics. Doesn't that deserve recognition?" Meadows looked out the window for a long time. Then he said, "In war, son, recognition doesn't stop bullets. And it doesn't change who you are when you come home. I built that scope because I had to, not because I wanted a medal." Gransden published his findings in 1974. The article appeared in a small military history journal, circulation 1,200 copies. A few historians noticed. Most didn't. It wasn't until 2003, during a renewed effort to document the contributions of black Marines in World War II, that the full scope of Meadows' achievement was formally recognized. The Marine Corps Historical Division added his story to the official record. A display was created at the National Museum of the Marine Corps in Quantico, Virginia, featuring a replica of the tin wire scope alongside Meadows' photograph and service record. Isaiah Meadows died in 2007 at the age of 86. He never saw the display, but his children did, and his grandchildren, and the thousands of Marines who walk through that museum every year and stop to read the plaque. Corporal Isaiah Meadows, USMC, Okinawa, 1945. When the impossible shot was needed, he built the impossible tool. The story of the tin wire scope isn't just about marksmanship. It's about what happens when institutions ignore brilliance because it comes from the wrong person. It's about the ingenuity that survives in foxholes and forgotten footnotes. And it's about the quiet truth that the most important innovations in history are often born from necessity, not permission. Meadows didn't wait for the Marine Corps to give him better equipment. He didn't wait for recognition. He didn't wait for the world to be fair. He built what he needed. He proved it worked. And he saved 1,200 lives. In war, brilliance doesn't ask for permission. It proves itself through fog, fire, and the refusal to accept defeat. If this story moved you, share it. Hit subscribe. Drop a comment about battlefield ingenuity you've heard of. History belongs to those who refuse to give up.